And when I woke up, I found myself here, standing on this stage, performing a poem where I get to say, I'm now 12 years cancer free. I got a sexy battle scar slash beneath my belly. Oh, and remember what they said about me never having children? I should also mention, I now have a son much more perfect than any poem that can ever come from me.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast, where we teach you the cheat codes to the game of life. I'm your host, Caption, aka Caption Red, and we have a very special guest today, Mr. Asia Samson. Asia Samson is an award-winning, record-breaking spoken word poet. Since 2009, he has toured over 600 colleges all over the country and has garnered awards such as the APCA College Performer of the Year and thrice Spoken Word Artist of the Year. Asia has also been featured on HBO Deaf Poetry Jam, TEDx, Button Poetry, BET, and NPR's Tiny Desk Concert. Asia, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. So happy to have you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, man. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. I've been a huge fan for years. Love all of the great poetry that you have, written and performed and everything. And so it's just a complete honor to have you on the podcast.
Oh, man, I'm glad. Like I said, I'm glad, man. I'm glad somebody connected us, man. You just never know who's listening to you. And then, I heard about what you're doing and we got connected. And I'm like, it sucks that I missed a message from them until like 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So I'm like I said, I'm glad to be here, man.
Yeah, no worries, man. I'm just happy that we could connect. So, I know that you've been in the game, the spoken word poetry game for a pretty long time, over a decade. And I know that you have, I'm sure, plenty of stories of things that have happened to you, whether you're doing spoken word or just in your life in general. And so I like to start every interview off with a fun story. So do you have a story you just want to share with myself and my audience?
Yeah, man. Listen, I've been touring poetry since 2006 is when I went professional. So it's been about 14 years that I've been touring. And a lot of the poets tend to get, I'm not saying jealous, but, they want to do what we do and they want to be able to make a living off their art. And I think that that's a valid thing to want. But a lot of times people tend to glorify touring as in this amazing thing where, we have a green room full of red M&Ms or,
Right.
Water that flows out of an angel's eye. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Right.
So, they think it's all great. And I've had some horrible shows and I love sharing the horrible side sometimes to touring. And one year we had to do a show. I'm not going to mention the school because that's kind of not cool. But I had a college show and it was a noon show. Now, anytime somebody tells me that I'm doing a noon show, I automatically start to get anxiety, right? Because noon shows usually mean they're going to put you in a cafeteria. They're going to put you in front of people who don't even know who you are and don't even care that you're there.
Right.
I had one show one time where I showed up and the school was like, oh, we forgot you were coming. But, we we set up a microphone right there on the stage if you want to just go up there and perform. And I'm like, I'm just going to look like this ranting Asian guy who just suddenly started screaming at people while they're trying to eat lunch, right? So we get to this show and it was a noon show. And when I got there, they put us in the little commune area where kids are like, students are like sitting there on their laptops. And there was one table where there was a group of kids playing Magic the Gathering, right? Like it was really odd. To the left of us, there was a blood drive going on, right?
Oh, my.
Jesus. Okay. So then I'm like, all right, well, where are we performing? I don't see a stage. You're like, oh, we're setting up the microphone right here. They set the microphone up in front of the vending machines, man, right? In front of the vending machine. So I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at my brother-in-law who tours with me, and I'm like, let's just be awkward for an hour. There was a $2,500 check at the end of this hour, right? Let's just get through this.
Right.
So I get up there and the people who brought me, they were like, well, we're going to be in the office upstairs, so just come and see us. First of all, if you are bringing me and you're not even watching the show, like that is the most disrespectful, like you brought me, you know what I mean?
Right.
It ain't like I'm begging to come perform here. You booked us, right? So they leave. And so I'm sitting there performing, man, and people are coming up behind me, all you hear is, the clink clink of like soda cans dropping or like people pressing buttons and people are like walking in front of me like I'm not there. I'm like, I have never felt so invisible in my life, right?
Wow.
So
Wow.
the show's from 12 to 1. 12:30 comes, and all of a sudden, this mass exodus of everybody just gets up and leaves, right? And then there's only like two people left
Oh
sitting there, and
no.
those two people are looking at me like, "You're still talking," and I'm like, "No, I have to, right? Like it's an hour, right?" So everybody leaves, and then I'm like, "Okay, that sucks, right?" So I finally get through the hour. It was 1 o'clock. There was only two people sitting there. So I go upstairs and I'm like, okay, well, we finished the show, and like a bunch of people left halfway through my set. I don't know why. I don't know if I sucked or whatever. And the advisor was like, "Oh no, they have class at 12:30," and I'm like, "So why would we set up a show knowing that people are gonna like not be there, right?" I'm like,
Oh
"Okay," and then
no.
they're like, "Well, it's 1 o'clock, so you guys have about an hour to get lunch, and then we will start our second show at 2." I'm like, "There's a fucking second show?" I'm like, "No," right? Like, and I'm looking at my brother-in-law like, "All right, I'm
Uh,
gonna do this again." So 2 o'clock hits, and I get up there, same situation, right? This time though, this time I'm performing. There are three people to my left, literally standing next to me while I'm on the microphone having a conversation, right? I look over at them, like I can touch them, like that's how close they were. I look over
right.
at them
Yeah.
and they look back at me and just roll their eyes. Like, do you not see that I'm performing, right? And I'm like, oh my
Wow.
God. And then
Oh,
2:30 hits again, mass exodus, right? So I'm figuring, all right, this is the same. People are probably, got class. So I look at my brother-in-law. I'm like, yo, we're done. I'm not going all the way to 3 with this, right? There's nobody here. Like there was literally nobody here except for the blood drive people, right?
sure.
And so I pack up. I go upstairs and I go, listen, I know we're supposed to perform to 3, but there is nobody down there because everybody left for class. And she's like, the advisor was like, oh, that's fine. That's how it is all the time. We know. And I'm like, if you know, then why, And she
Oh
goes,
no.
but I hope you guys had a good time. And then she holds out, she goes, would you guys like a muffin? And holds out like a plate of muffins. And I'm like, no, we're good. Thank you. And I
Oh,
bounce out of there so quick.
oh no.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, nobody cares.
Yeah. Wow, man. Well, it's funny because probably most of the people who gave blood that day probably felt a lot better afterwards than you did.
So awkward, man. It was the
Oh.
most awkward thing. And I'm just like, oh, why am I here? But
Well, I'm sure somebody took something that you said to heart.
mhm,
Somebody did.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. That's great, man. That is the ultimate story right there. That is wow, man. That's great. Oh man, I can't stop smiling over here. Okay. So not all shows are that bad, obviously.
Of course not.
Um and you worked really hard to get to that point. Um,
Right. Yeah.
so tell me about that journey of becoming a professional spoken word poet. Just kind of how you got started and just kind of how you got to become a professional and so on and so forth.
Um, well, luck, really. But also, they always say that like, luck is when, your skill and opportunity meet, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Because you can have all the luck in the world. Someone offers you a job. If you don't know how to do it, you're not gonna be right, right?
Right.
Um, I used to work when I was in college. I was going to school for design. While I was working in design, I was working at a credit card company doing telemarketing. And one of my coworkers at that bank where I was working for telemarketing, they were like, there's this open mic at the local college here. Let's go check it out. Now, at that time, HBO Def Poetry had just come out. This was, I think, 2001. HBO Def Poetry had just come out, and I remember watching HBO Def Poetry and going, man, that looks so cool. Because I've always been a writer. I've been writing
Mm-hmm.
poems since I was, since I read Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends was the first
Yep.
poetry book that I've ever read. And I've always loved language. So they told me to go to this open mic, and I went, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bring some of my poems with me that, I got inspired to write after watching Def Poetry, because I started kind of writing slam poems, but didn't really know what slam meant.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to this open mic. They had somebody featuring that night who was also a college touring poet, and I'm like, oh wow, somebody actually can make money off of this, right? But I remember performing that first time at that open mic, and I got the bug, and I'm like, I kept coming back week after week, and then as I started coming back to that open mic at the college, I met people who knew about open mics around town, and so I heard about this open mic in Delray Beach, Florida. Went to that. Started winning the slam competitions they had there. And then while I was there, I met somebody who had another open mic in Fort Lauderdale. I went to Fort Lauderdale, and when I was in Fort Lauderdale open mic, there was this other Asian guy. Now, as an Asian person who lives in the South, we're not living in California.
Oh,
When you run
absolutely.
into right? So when you run into another Asian person, you're kind of like, oh my God, you're Asian too. We're the only
Mm-hmm.
Asian here in a sea of black people or in a sea of white people, whatever that open mic is. And this guy comes up to me, and he was like, oh my God, bro, I can't believe there's another Asian poet. I really want us to be friends. And it kind of creeped me out a little bit because
Sure.
he gave me his number, and he was like, oh, give me a call. And I gave him mine, but I'm like, all right, whatever. He starts calling me almost every day after that. Like, oh, when are you going to hang out? And I'm like, oh, this dude is like
Okay.
creeping me out, right?
Right.
So I'm like, one day I'm like, you know what? Let me just get him off my back. All right, let's go hang out, right?
Right.
And that man took me to all the other poetry venues I didn't even know about
Oh, wow.
in Miami, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I started getting known. Quick side note, he turned out to be the best friend of my wife, of my current wife, like I had more, my
Right.
wife's ex-fiance, right? And so when my wife and her fiance had broken up, she had reached out to him to like take them out, and he had called me. He was like, hey, one of my friends is like wanting to go out, and I don't, so that's how I met my wife, through him. So
That's amazing.
yeah. So the night of me going to that poetry venue and meeting that guy there, had I gone any other night, I probably would have never met him, right? So he kind of basically opened my world to all the poetry venues and introduced me to my wife, which is,
Yeah.
fate, right? So, so I was doing open mics in Miami, and I was going like every day, 4 times a week, because there was just a poetry venue in Miami at the time, almost every night of the week. And then in one of those open mics I performed at, as soon as I finished, some guy comes running to me out afterwards. He's like, man, I need to represent you in the college market. Let's work together. This is that and that. So I get offers like that all the time. People say things, but they don't really, mean it, or they can't really do anything. But I gave him my number anyway. 3 weeks later, he calls me up. He said, there's this conference that I want you to go to. It's a college conference. If you're down to go. And I told him that moment, I'm like, you won't believe this, but just yesterday I got diagnosed with testicular cancer, and I'm actually going into surgery in like 3 days.
Right.
I went through my surgery. He checked up, made sure I was okay. And then afterwards, I told him I was doing some fundraising to pay for the surgery. So he started coming to all my fundraising events, which was really cool. And he was helping out. And then the conference came up. He goes, look, you're going through a lot, but let me pay for the conference. Let's go to this conference. Let's do what you can. Don't worry about paying me. I just want to see what you can do there. So we went, and bro, we killed that conference. Like, literally standing ovation after my performance. And then our booth got swarmed by people, like people wanting to book me. And that's when I knew, okay, I now have a freaking career, right? Like, that was insane. And then HBO Def Poetry had called that same month. And then I did HBO Def Poetry, and it was really cool because I was like, I'm sitting here on the stage of a TV show that I used to watch. And here I am on the same stage now. Right.
Absolutely.
And then everything just from there on out. That's how it's been.
That's amazing. And how many years was it from when you watched Def Poetry and were inspired, and then you were actually on the stage of Def Poetry Jam?
So I started watching Def Poetry maybe 2001, and I was on season 6, which was 2006. So, I started watching season 1. Yeah. So, and I was on season 6. So yeah, about 6 years.
Okay, cool. So 6 years ago, some grinding. There's a fair amount of hard work involved.
Yeah,
Um,
but honestly, I didn't even really start going to open mics, and I didn't meet my wife till 2004. So for 3 years, I was kind of just toying with spoken word. It wasn't something
sure.
that I was. It wasn't until 2004 that I met my wife, and at the same time when I started really hitting the open mics, and then 2 years later was when I ran into my agent. So like I said, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But because I had been crafting for the last
hmm
2 years, as soon as the opportunity hit, I was ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And I love, like I said, I love all your stuff and everything that you are putting out there. I just go through just emotions. I'm
Uh,
sure this isn't the first time you've heard this when people talk
yeah,
about your work, but I go
yeah.
through a lot of emotions when I'm listening to your stuff, and it's all like, yeah, it ends up being positive, but that's definitely my
Well,
experience.
that's an entire conversation in and of itself. I When I write, it's always in one poem. How do I take the audience into a variety of emotions, whether that's laughter, sadness, whether that's the ups and downs. I want to take you on a roller coaster, and I always, because I love telling stories, and I consider myself a storyteller more so than a poet. I like to be able to paint that kind of picture to where at the end it feels like I just watched a movie,
Yeah.
and it
hmm
took me through those things with a climax and a resolution and all of that. And I always try to tell people too, like young poets, whenever I teach them how to write, it's like, okay, you can talk about problems all you want. You can talk about what your complaint is, but if you don't offer a solution at the end of that or some sort of resolution to your conflict in your poem, then you just sound like you're complaining. Like you need to be able to give them a little bit of hope, man. Like at the end of everything, no matter how sad, give them a little bit of hope, because if you don't, then what are we going through this for? You know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And just the ability to touch people's lives with your honest and real story of your experience was just amazing. And one thing I love about spoken word poetry is I don't feel alone in the world when
Yeah,
I listen to it, because I realize that we're all in this kind of universal experience.
that's
It's
right.
not the same experience, but
That's right.
yeah. So. Yeah. Speaking of which, why should people go? Your stuff's all over the internet. Every,
hmm
spoken word poet's work is all over the internet. So why should people go to a live show?
Well, if anything, if there's anything that COVID-19 has been teaching us,
hmm
right, is that we have spent way too much time being virtual, and we have spent too much. Now it's kind of like, all right, the human connection is lost, right? I'm more alive when I'm in front of people, and you'll feel my poems hopefully more presently when you're hearing it from me right there, right? There's
Yep.
a reason. Why do people go to concerts? Why do the energy of the thing, right? Why do people go to church? Why do people get together for barbecues? The human presence is amazing, right? And when I'm in the moment, when I'm sitting there surrounded by people who came to watch my show, who took time out of their life to come watch my show, I could feel their love, right? And I'm hoping that they can feel mine, and we can kind of just be there together, where we can shut the entire world out and just be there, right?
hmm
You can listen to me online, but then okay, here comes your cat meowing next to you, and
Sure.
or your kid come running down the stairs. But when you come to a live show, then we are shutting everything out for a minute. All the bills, all the spam calls, all the bill collectors, and we're shutting it all out for an hour, and we're going to be together for that hour.
So yeah, absolutely, I agree. And honestly, I love live spoken word poetry. It sets my soul on fire, and I need to. That's probably going to be one of the first things that I do when I get free
Yeah,
again
go to
out
a
of my
venue.
house. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Speaking of poetry and your subject matter of poetry, you talk a lot about the disappointments that you've had in your life. You talk a lot about some really tough things that you've been through, whether it's the cancer whether it's, miscarriages, your sister passing. How did you deal with those, huge life events? Because those are the things that, rock you to your core. And so I think in this day and time, everybody needs to understand how to cope and process things. So what's your process like with that?
Well, it's true that we have more depressed people in this generation than we've ever had in history. Either that or we just weren't counting back then, or we didn't diagnose for that then. But it's true that there's a lot more to be depressed about now, especially with the state of the world. And with us being able to be online, we can feel more negativity than we ever have, right? For me, I mean, look, let me first say that, yes, those are the most horrible things to have happened that can happen to somebody. And some people, okay, well, I experienced death, and somebody might say, well, I experienced miscarriages, and another person might say, well, I experienced cancer. But then when you experience all of it, constantly, it's just like, my God, like I look back, like, how did I survive that? I look back on it now. I was telling my wife, like, man, we went through some things, and I'm still in awe of the fact that we're still ticking, right? Like, how did I not go into the corner and off myself right after all of that?
Sure.
That being said, that's what life is. Life is going to do that. Life is going to throw these curveballs at you, and life is going to be harder for some than others. And let me not say harder, because what's hard for me may not be anything to someone else, but what they might be going through might be nothing to me. So let me just start there. I will say though that, I mean, life becomes interesting when we are challenged. Life is interesting when we are put through the rigors, right? I mean, diamond can't happen without pressure. Blades can't be sharp unless they're put through fire. I mean, there's just all these things that unless you go through something, you just don't know what you're made of, right? You don't know what your metal is, right? Until you go through it. And so for me, I've gone through those type of things, and yes, they're hard, and God, they're painful. But at the same time, it's also shaped me to be the person who I am. All the things that I have right now are also as a result of those things happening. So it's hard for me to be like, well, this would have sucked because this shouldn't have happened, because then would my life have turned out to be the same way? Like, would I have a career right now if I didn't go through cancer, right? And cancer, in a way, saved my life. Now, do I want cancer to come back? Obviously not, right?
Sure.
But it's really how you respond. And so to me, when I talk to people, I'm like, yeah, it may not get better now, it may not get better tomorrow, it may not get better next year, but it will get better. But your job is to see it through. The worst that can happen is you're going to die, right? But the fact that you haven't died yet, the fact that you're still here, then don't try to rush that process of death. Just stick it out. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is you're going to die. Well, you're going to die anyway, right? So stick it out, see what happens, see how your story unfolds. It's like reading a book and then halfway through going, okay, it's getting crazy now, I'm putting this book away. Well, you never know how it ends. You know?
Absolutely.
Your story is still being written. Your story is still being written. In this moment, your story is still being written. And until you see it through to the end, it may seem unbearable right now, but hey, man, the best movies, the best stories, they always put the character through something before they come out on the other side. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's an amazing thought. And I 100% agree with you as, someone who's, had my own situations in life and, come out on the other end.
Right.
So with that whole conversation about cancer, and you said cancer saved your life. So like, how did that change you? And like, what are the positives and the good things that came out of it? Because a lot of people would just look at cancer and be like, oh, that's just all bad. There's nothing good about cancer, right?
There's a study where they had asked people who were born blind or were born or had gotten into an accident and lost a limb. Like they asked people who were like veterans of war who had lost a leg or whatever. They're like, if you can go back, would you tell yourself not to enlist in the military? And they said no. Like, I would go through this whole thing again the exact same way. And they're like, yeah, but it's horrible. You lost a limb and all that. And then they're like, yeah, but you don't know what I've gained from that either, right? And so people will look at something and automatically be like, oh my God, that's the most horrible thing. Well, you don't know because you haven't gone through it yet. You haven't put your body through the rigors of what that might be like, right? So for me, looking back, cancer gave me purpose in my writing. Man, you should have heard the poems I wrote before cancer. It was just like, okay, I'm Asian. I'm going to write some Asian poems. Even if I'm going to write about Asian oppression, even if I know jack about Asian oppression because I haven't really researched it, or I've not really felt Asian discrimination yet. So, but I'm going to write about it like I'm dope, and I was writing like just fluff, man. And I remember winning a slam one time, and someone who I know very well now, who's a good friend of mine now, was back then. She said to me, she goes, your poems are very rah. Like there's no substance in them, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's written really good. Oh, the language is great, but I just don't see you in it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see what you're trying to say. Yeah, your rhythm is good. Yeah, you have great bars. But what are you really saying? Do you even really know what you're saying? And I looked at it and I'm like, I really don't know what I'm saying. I really don't know what this is. This sounds like fluff, And then I went through all these things, and when it came from true stories, when it came from real life experience, and I was able to write about it, oh my God, the power that came with that. And like I said, I hate that I lost my sister. It was tough to go through cancer. I hate that my wife had to go through certain miscarriages. But out of those things came art. And no, I don't want to just find bad things in my life so I can turn them into art. But those bad things happened. There's nothing I can do to change those bad things happening. Then the least I could do is to heal by turning it into art or turning it into something that other people can hear and can find hope in. That, like you said, when I listen to poetry, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. If I can do that for someone by turning my struggles into art and letting somebody hear that, you know what, I went through a death with a loved one. I'm glad I'm not the only one. And Asia just put into words what I've been feeling. Oh, I don't feel so alone now. Then my sister's dying was not in vain. My going through cancer was not in vain. My wife's miscarriages were not in vain.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I've seen how you have touched people's lives with your art, and them writing you those messages about how they're going through the same thing or a similar thing, and you gave them hope. So it's awesome. Okay, so now that you're successful, right? Well, I don't know, man. All those records you broke and all those awards you've won, I would say that you're quite successful. But but yeah,
my bank account will tell you otherwise.
Yeah, right. Well, well, come this fall, it'll all turn around. Don't worry about it. But with that being said, let's say you were to rewind back to your younger self, and you learned a lot of life lessons. You've gained a lot of wisdom through living and trials and tribulations. So what would you tell your younger self, if you were able to meet him? Just some good life advice.
Oh, man. I would probably tell him, prepare for the future more. I tended to live frivolously, like, oh, I'm always going to have shows, oh, I'm always going to have this. And there are times when there was a period where until I started touring with my brother-in-law, there was like a year of where I stopped getting college shows until I found him again. Then we started breaking records. Prior to that, I'm like, man, I should have saved up a little bit more. I should have, this is advice I'm telling myself even now, right? Like I should have invested in this, or I should have done that. But that's on the adulting side. Now, on the life side of things, I will tell them, like you're going to go through some things, but those things are going to shape you. And so just be ready for them and be ready to write and devote time to your craft more. Like I devote a lot of time to my craft now, but back then it was kind of like I was on this high. I was doing so well that I'm like, oh, I'm just going to push that off because I'm touring the colleges right now. I should have started putting things in place then. I should have started reaching out further, and I shouldn't have gotten complacent in touring. I was so complacent with making money touring that I didn't explore the other avenues of I should have started an online stuff. I should have started an online vlog long ago. I should
Right.
have done this. I mean, there's a lot of, there's things we say to ourselves that are regretful, like, oh, I should have, I should have, I should have.
Hmm.
But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, where we are in our life is where we are meant to be. And so I would probably tell my younger self then to just, live your life, enjoy every moment, and don't think so much about becoming successful in that sense. Don't grind for that. Just make sure that what you're doing is good work. Just make sure that what you're doing is invaluable work, and focus on that more than the how do I get on Def Jam,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
or how do I go
absolutely.
viral, or
Right. Yeah, and that's what the kids want. Every kid nowadays, every
yeah,
young person nowadays wants to go viral.
just do good
Um,
work. So when you look back, you can say, I changed some people's lives. May not be a lot of people's lives, but I changed some people's lives, and I gave my best work. That to me that's what I would tell my younger self.
yeah, absolutely. That's great, man.
And
Yeah,
buy stock in Netflix. That's what I want to say.
Feinstein, Netflix, Netflix, Amazon, Starbucks.
Oh my
There's
God.
a list.
Imagine. No, maybe
Uh,
not Starbucks, but Amazon. Oh my God, had I known.
yes. It's wild, man. That's wild. Very cool, man. So, in that same vein, like, what is one life lesson that you've learned that has like revolutionized your life,
Mm,
right? Like
yeah.
after you learn that life lesson, it was just like, I can't believe I know this, but now that I do, I'm kind of unstoppable. So,
I've learned that the picture you have in your head will not always be what's going to happen, and you need to learn to adapt. Because if you have a picture in your head of how it's supposed to look, and your life is currently not meeting what that picture looks like, you are going to miss the amazing things that that picture is showing you,
hmm,
right?
yes,
We are so driven of having, like, this is what I want. This is how my spouse is going to be like. This is the kind of person I'm going to marry. This is the kind of things my kids are going to do. If there's one thing I've learned with my kid, I thought my kid was going to do certain things by the time he's this age, and he's not. And there were things that I thought he was going to be into, that I'm going to be like loving to do with him. He's not. And I'm like, man, if I kept pushing him to do how I imagined my son would be like, then I would totally miss who he is right now. And so I say the same thing with your life. If you have a picture in your life and you are so hell bent on making it look exactly like that picture, you are going to miss what the picture actually looks like and how beautiful that actual picture looks like, because that's probably better than what you had ever even imagined for yourself.
I love that answer so much, man. That's amazing. You know what? I needed to hear that today.
I did too,
Nobody.
I think.
That's
I
great,
did.
man. It's fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, that's a really important thing. And as we sit here and talk about our journey, and the journey of it not turning out to be the way that you wanted it to be, and embracing that at the same time, because I'm going to say this again, you are successful. What principles and habits did you follow and practice in order to help you to get to these stages in life and win awards and, travel the country and break records and so on and so forth?
Integrity in my work. Right now, a lot of people tend to want to do what is trendy. And there was a moment when a lot of young poets were getting into like trauma porn, which is poetry filled with trauma. And people were loving that because they saw that that's what was going viral on YouTube. And people started writing poems like that. And people were looking for things to write about that never really even happened to them, but wanted to write about it because,
Ugh.
oh, this is going to make a dope viral video, right? If I wrote that way, if I wrote with just what was trending at the time, I would, not have the integrity behind what I was saying. Now, not to say there are some poets who have written those kind of poems that was really hard for them to write because maybe they were, they were sexually abused, or they were, you know, victims of violence. People have gone through some stuff and they wrote it out, and I admire and I applaud them for writing those things out.
Mhm.
However, some people do force like something that never really happened to them, and they write a story about it because they think it's going to go viral. And for me, from day one, I always, once I went through cancer, once I got over the hump of writing these trendy poems, whatever they were at the time, I started saying to myself, all right, doesn't matter if people will listen. It doesn't matter if people don't care. Have integrity in your work, right? Write what is true to you, write what is, what is important to you, and write it with beautiful language up to your capabilities, and be you. And then people will hear it. And if people love it, people love it. If they don't, they don't. But at least you were true to yourself. So all the way up until now, I may not be able to go up and slam and win a slam competition, because there are some poets who just have those bars and they would drop these dope, slam poems on me. Okay, awesome. If I sat there and I tried to write a slam poem just to beat them, could I do it? I'm sure I could. I have the language too,
Right.
But then I don't think that I would be true to myself. I'm not telling the story that I want to tell, and so I always said to myself, just be who I am, and wherever that leads me is where that's going to lead me, and wherever that leads them in their writing is going to lead them. Some go on to become college touring poets. Some people go and win Grammys. Some others are becoming national slam champions. Everybody has a path. Like I said before, don't paint a picture in your head of what you think it's going to look like. Just embrace the picture that you're in, and everything will fall by the wayside.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, you can, I guess, look yourself in the mirror and be like, yeah, I didn't,
That's right.
I didn't succumb to the thing that was popping at the time.
That's right.
Yeah, it's important.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, man. Well, we're, getting close to the end of the interview. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share before this, we just wrap up?
I mean, I could be serious about that, or I could be hilarious about that, or whatever. But
do both. Do both. That's kidding. No, pick a lane. Pick a lane. You're fine.
Dude, like we're all going crazy at home right now, right? Some of us, right? Some people are going crazy. They can't be at home anymore. They're like losing their minds, and cool. But take this time to really take inventory of your life, right? Take this time to be like, where am I? And come to the reality that, man, life is fragile, bro. And life is iffy, right? 1 minute we are just going up and hugging people and being out and about, and before you know it, we're like stuck in our homes and things are shutting down around us. Like, what the hell just happened to us in the last couple of months, right? Like, this is insane. If you think about it, this is insane. Like, the whole world, not just us, not just, oh, we're in the South, so a hurricane's coming, so we're sheltering, and everybody else is living their lives, or people up north are going through a snowstorm and we're like having fun out here on the beach. No, the whole world is in this shutdown mode, like, in that sense. So looking at that, start thinking about, like, how prepared am I? What have I done with my life? And what are the things that I've given my attention to that really at the end of the day is just trivial, right? Like, why did I worry so much about that? And then before you know it, it's gone. And you've seen my last video that I released about COVID-19, and in that vein, it's like, man, a lot of us we spent so much time just being online. We spent so much time living a virtual life, and maybe this is a wake up call for us to put that aside, man. And
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, be careful what you wish for, because it just came true.
Yeah.
And you don't like it at all, do you? That's good, man. I like that. That's a great way to end it. One last question: what are you doing to stay sane? Because
I never go sane. I put it this way: when I have my poetry mask on and I am Asia Samson, the guy who spits poems, right? I'm a very huge extrovert. However, when I am home and I'm not being out and about, and sometimes I don't like being out and about, I consider myself introverted. So
Mhm.
I'm really not going crazy here at home. I'm
Okay.
actually finding this time to be a crucial creative moment for me because I'm finding all these things that I'm doing that I'm loving. I'm either writing new poems or I'm working on my documentary or I'm working on leather work hobbies or
Yeah.
I'm making videos about the installs I'm doing on my Jeep so we can go camping and overlanding and things like that. It's weird that the things that I'm into that are not poetry related necessarily. And so every day I'm finding things that I'm loving. And then on top of that, I've been getting some opportunities these last week of being part of some big poetry things online that I never had available before. So I'm actually thriving
That's
in
great.
this type of thing. What I don't like is not being able to be like, all right, let me take a break. Yo, let's meet up with some friends and let's go get a drink at a bar. Like
Right.
that I miss. Or the open mics that I can go to. That I miss very
Right.
much. But the
Absolutely.
being home and being stuck with my family and teaching my son some things like and spending more time with my wife, I love all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Very cool, man. Well, that's good. I'm jealous of you introverts right now because I am going a little crazy over here, but it's all right. I manage, so it's all good. Very cool.
Meditation, man, meditation.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. No, you're right. All right, Asia, we are almost out of time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'd like to end this interview with a little freestyle rapping. It's a thing I do.
Okay.
So I'll just kind of freestyle wrap up this interview. Oops. Is that loud enough? Is that loud enough for my vocals, or should I turn it up?
I can hear it. It's good.
Okay. All right. Check. All right. Yo. Yo, he come through in a measure. His name is Asia. Up on the stage with a freaking poem. You just know him because he's sharing his heart. Even the things that are really quite dark. No, he don't miss a mark. He just keep writing. And that's what I say. He's on the mic and he's up in here sharing some things about the hard times because he had hard times, but it's okay because he just persevered up in here. Don't throw the book away. You got to finish it now when I win it for real. And that's what I say. That's the real deal. That is the thing that you got to go through a whole bunch of fire so you can inspire a whole bunch of people and touch their hearts. And you got to measure me with integrity because that's what you need. Don't ride on trends, even if it takes you straight to a Benz. Understand right now, you got to put in work. You got to go out there. You got to go and search. You got to tour the country and know what's inside you. And that's what I say. He comes and arrives to conclusions. Yo, that dude keeps moving. And that's what I say. Yo, it is luck, but it's also fate. You come through and create. And that's what I say. It's no mistake. You just got to be prepared. Up in here. And that's what I say. The dude just shared a whole bunch of things straight from his life. Created a family with a beautiful wife and a wonderful child. And yo, I see smiles up in the video. You should check them out when I wreck, no doubt. And I'm coming off the top. And that's what I say. With a mic drop, I spit off the top. And that's how I go. And that's what I said with an Asia flow. All right. There it
That's
is.
dope, man.
Yeah,
I can never
absolutely,
do
man.
that.
Yeah. It's just it's a thing that I enjoy doing, and I'm just out here just trying to wrap things up. So, Asia, I thank you so much for the interview. By the way, I'm
Yeah, for sure.
super excited about putting this out. As far as people connecting with you online, where are the places that they can connect with you? What are some things that are happening that you just kind of want to share, so on and so
Okay.
forth.
I'm on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Look for the Asia Project. You can even go to theasiaproject.com. That's the Asia Project, not the Asian Project, because if
Got it.
you go to theasianproject.com, it's actually a website that sells bowls and noodles. I'm not lying. I don't want you to go out there and be like,
Nice.
oh, that's his hustle. No, that is not.
Yeah.
theasiaproject.com. And then also I'm working on a documentary right now. Well, I've been working on it for the last 3 years, and I'm trying to really wrap it up while this COVID thing is happening. It features 30 of the country's most influential poets and some newbies and things like that, that basically sharing their experience with the craft and all sorts of things like that. So I'm hoping to get like a streaming service to buy it. So there's that. And then on Instagram, I started doing an open mic every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. Some legends have been coming through and spitting poems on there. So you need to jump on 7 p.m. virtually on Instagram. Just follow my live feed at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays, and it's pretty dope.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure to tag all that in the show notes and just put the word out there. So, Asia, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You're dope. I'm super excited about seeing that documentary when it comes out. And yeah, just thank you so much for just sharing your heart, your knowledge, and wisdom, and all the beautiful things that you're creating.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good day, man.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right, so that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed the interview. I hope you got a lot out of it. Now, I'm going to make a quick request, which is if you have been listening to the podcast, if you have been getting a lot out of it, please go and leave a rating and or review on Apple Podcasts. What that does for the show is it helps to get the word out, and it also helps to get better guests. All right, so that's it. I hope you're well wherever you are, physically and mentally. And until next time, peace out.